Welcome to the show, Florian and Roxana. Today, we're diving into the SDV revolution. We'll explore about how iProcess bridges the gap between Silicon Valley speed and German engineering quality. We'll start by exploring your unique model, move on to the high stakes challenge of integration and compliance, and finally discuss the future of automotive software. I apologize. Roxana, as a founder and Florian as the SDV architect, can you explain how your combined expertise as SPICE, compliance, and Tesla-grade validation creates a unique value proposition for your clients?
Yeah, so what we bring to the table is unique in that case that we actually know both sides of the spectrum, right? So we are working continuously with Silicon Valley companies. I myself worked at Tesla for 6 years and at NEO for a year. Roxana is continuously working together with cutting edge companies over there as well. But in the same time, we also spend significant amount in what we call the traditional or legacy automotive industry. So companies that are around for about 100 years and they are being great in building cars, mostly electrical and mechanical products. And now this revolution comes in with the software-defined vehicle, much more focus on how software shapes the car in functionality and features and user experience. And I sometimes jokingly say we speak both languages, right? So we are capable of translating between this modern cutting edge SDV world and this like super scaled and established legacy car making.
Yeah, from my point of view, it's actually quite simple. You should want to develop a great product. And this great product will be compliant because it's engineered well, it's designed well, it's tested correctly. You got the user feedback into designing your product. So people should not be scared of compliance if they want to do great engineering. I think they fit together really well.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is a lot of times we see compliance or regulations are used as a shield why you cannot accelerate development and why you cannot actually do the whole SDV thing, agile and all this kind of stuff. And this is where Roxana comes in and play very often to just debunk this false information, right? So the standards and regulations and the frameworks are not actually hindering you to do that, but people like to pull them up as a defense mechanism. It's like, oh, we can't do what Tesla does or what the Chinese companies are doing because we have to follow ASPICE, for example. And that is it's just not true. And if you drill into that statement, you often find that this is based on very old ASPICE standards or framework knowledge. And people just like, we learned that in the 90s and we can't change that. And it's like, there's newer versions of those frameworks out there, which actually allow you much more. I don't want to stretch the term agile because agile means a lot and nothing, but it allows you, even if you are very strictly adhering to certain frameworks like ASPICE, you actually allowed to have a dynamic development.
Right. And usually this happens, there is this fear of compliance because it comes to them as an afterthought. By the way, we also have to do this, which is too late and they do too little. And they see it like overhead and documentation instead of actually designing it from the beginning. Hey, we also want to be compliant. We don't want to kill anybody with our product. We want to have, right, a great adoption and so on.
Yeah,
So,
as a
yeah.
fun anecdote, we were talking about my processes at Tesla back in the day, and we were finding that we're actually fairly compliant with what for example, ASPICE framework is asking for, just by designing and engineering the product to the best way we could, and not by reading a standard or a framework and follow it.
And I know we've said iSpot. Well, first of all, everyone should know like the only constant is change, right? And
True.
that's all we need to like work on. But just for our listeners who may not be very well versed with this technical jargon, what is ASPICE?
I like that. To Roxana.
Yes. That's what I do. ASPICE, it stands for Automotive Software Process Improvement and Capability Determination. It's a framework, right? So a set of base practices, if you like, for assessing processes, and you can also use it for designing your processes. It is very popular in automotive because the car manufacturers are asking their suppliers to be ASPICE compliant to a specific level. And then the suppliers are asking their own suppliers. So you have this chain of compliance that everybody needs to follow those base practices. And I think the overall goal is that you have some sort of good engineering practices that you're using, and then you will have a good product in the end, right?
And the way to measure that, right? and compare.
Right.
Florian, you mentioned that iProcess speaks both languages, the Tesla Neo side, the agile continuous feature development, and the legacy OEM side, which is process quality compliance. What is the single biggest misconception that the legacy OEMs have about the Tesla style approach? And conversely, what is the biggest thing the Silicon Valley companies don't understand about the need for compliance and process?
So it's very interesting that established automotive companies actually expect that there is no process whatsoever in those fast-paced companies, and it doesn't matter if it's Tesla or if it's Lucid or if it's Neo from China or other BYD. They expect from the outside, it's like, this is just a Wild West. Everybody's doing what they want, and then in the end they nail it together and they hope that everything works. But Tesla, for example, is very process driven. The biggest difference is that the process is adjusted dynamically whenever it becomes necessary. And that can be every month, every week, whatever. And when you look into traditional car makers, they are following processes which are like decades old in some cases. Right? And yes, of course, something I defined in 1999 is not urgently applying to 2025, 2026 speed of development, right? Because a lot of things are getting more automated. We have open source, we have some shared libraries, all this kind of stuff without going into detail. But the way we are developing cars and software in cars has significantly changed in the last decade and a half. And so if you rely on a process that was defined before that, obviously it is not working. So the biggest misconception from the outside into Silicon Valley is like, they don't do processes and this is why they are so fast, but it's basically not going to work in the long run. Not true. So there's very well-defined process, but it's defined by the users, not by an outside group. And it is continuously adapted to the need. And therefore it's actually lived rather than being some, like, as Roxana said, something that's put on top, right? The other way around, I think the number one thing from Silicon Valley to the outside world is scaling, right? And you see it with Tesla, very simple. They only develop one car at a time, right? While Toyota or Volkswagen, they come out with 100 models per year. So the way they do that is through compliance models, because they actually have a very good framework how to develop at scale in bigger numbers and in parallel. While a Tesla, Lucid, and Rivian, it's all the same. They only work on one product with their best people, right? So what they have to learn is actually to scale broadly while still keeping the momentum going.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Roxana, for a non-automotive listener, why is achieving SPICE level 2 or higher no longer a regulatory hurdle, but it is a fundamental requirement for a modern OEM to manage the complexity of a software-defined vehicle?
So ASPICE is never regulatory, just so you know. Regulatory would be required by law. All of the standards that we have in our industry, in the software development part, are voluntary, including functional safety. So this is a big discussion in our industry, why they are not regulatory if they have such a huge impact, right? That would be one big question. We don't know yet. NHTSA and others, they have to come in here and make this a law. ASPICE is a risk management tool, if you'd like. The way they are using it right now is they're evaluating the risk with a particular supplier. So if the supplier is using wild west processes or principles, then they have the car manufacturers has a higher risk when it goes into production, right? So recalls, and it's getting really, really expensive. So they're using this tool as risk management and a way of achieving or assessing that good engineering was done, right? So this applies to any type of concept. If it's software-defined vehicle, hardware-defined vehicle, cloud-defined vehicle, it doesn't matter. Those principles are kind of timeless.
And let's not get started on AI-defined vehicle. We talk about that next time.
Yeah, that's true.
That's really cool. And what are the most important principles of ASPICE that every car manufacturer should strive to achieve?
So ASPICE, the most important, that's an interesting question. I don't think there is one most important. I think there are a mixture. It's about specifying, but you don't have to know everything from the beginning. It's about going on a release by release, testing, learning, and adjusting, right? So it's like typical development, if you like, right? It's just you have to plan it and you have to organize it in a way that you coordinate now with your suppliers' deliveries, with hardware, with software, with all the other components. So you have those milestones that actually are integrated into the vehicle so you can have real feedback. The way they're doing it right now, the supply chain, if you ask me personally, it's a complete mess. They can talk about SDV as long as they want until they fix their supply chain. That's not going to happen. That's what I'm seeing right now. Right now, it's their deliveries are all over the place. The suppliers that are not coordinated by software, by hardware, by versions, by testing cycles, I think it's very uncoordinated what I'm seeing right now, and it's a big risk.
So what I would like to say is like, it's basically written down common sense. If you, and going back to our example from the earlier Tesla days, not the earliest, but the earlier Tesla days, the fact that we were close to A-Spice level 2 is what we were doing just by do common sense engineering. That is basically what the OEMs want to see and measure. And that's the thing, right? So yes, of course, every company, every supplier will tell them, hey, yes, we do everything right. Of course, we have the best people assigned to your project and we do the right things. But using a compliance metric is a way to actually just measure and confirm that this is correct. And just to jump on this, what Roxana says about the supply chain, the automotive industry is in a traditional way, you order a product, you send a specification, somebody is making you the product, like a component, and hands it over like in physical fashion, gives it into your hands, right? You can look at it, you can test it, and if you're happy with it, you put it into your vehicle and you sell it to the customer. This is how a traditional works. Now software comes into play. Software is not tangible. And unfortunately, for a lot of people who are managing those projects, it's literally not tangible. They can't grab it. And so they don't urgently understand it because software can actually be delivered later. It can be modified later. It can be multiplied easily, right? So if you order 1 million parts and you suddenly need 2 million, that's a problem. You can't do that. With software, you can just like copy it, right? And so what Roxana is referring to when she's talking about the supply chain, one of those aspects is that the way software is supplied is very, very different than the way traditional car making happens, where you have something like an SOP, so start of production, and you have an EOP, the end of production. And in between, you're supplying a tangible product. Software is now continuously developed, continuously delivered, and as well still continues after the end of production because it goes to the end of life of the product. And that is much, much longer than what end of production was right now. Just for your information, there's in Europe, there's cybersecurity requirements that say 15 years after end of production, you have to do software updates. Given the average production is somewhere between 8 and 10 years, that's like 25 years of today. So we are about 2026. That's 2051. You have to update product that you shipped today. So you can't do that with your traditional supply chain idea that, build, deliver, move on, build the next generation and move on. You have to have a completely different strategy.
Wow. Sorry, Roxanne, did you want to add something to it?
No, it's like I do not like it when they use compliance or blindly following something as the obstacle, because that's not the obstacle. The obstacle is the whole supply chain and how they design it, how they're thinking about it or not thinking about it.
So the interesting thing is that all those compliance frameworks and requirements are actually written fairly vague in many cases on purpose. And you can actually tailor them or apply them in different ways. And this is where iProcess actually comes in, because we have the deep understanding and can apply certain things that work better for some companies, but they still fit into the compliance. While then you have other assessment companies who are going strict by the printed word, which is not the intention at all. And they say like, oh, you can't do that. And I mean, we've literally seen assessments coming in and say, no, you have to have your requirements in this requirements management tool. And then the tailoring is no, you don't. You just have to have the requirements documented, and you have traceability, and you have to have reviews, and you have a process around it. But it doesn't have to be one of those 3 tools that you've seen before. If I make my own, that's totally okay with the standard. And this is where we really thrive as a company, helping our customers, is like thinking outside of the box a little bit, but still make sure in the end it fits into the box.
Right.
Yeah. You did mention something about integration as a huge challenge, Florian. I'm not sure if you've already touched it. Like, you probably have already touched on this, but I just wanted to ask the question. Not just communication between components, but integration as in the interaction and functional validation. How does the 100-year-old relationship between OEMs and tier one suppliers make this technical integration problem so much harder to solve today? What is the first step iProcess takes to break this bottleneck?
I mean, the very short one sentence answer would be to break down the walls and bring the people to work together. But let me explain you where the problem origins. So as you mentioned, traditional collaborations, and I'm talking about sometimes the contracts are 50 years ongoing, right? So the supplier and the OEM, so the car maker are working for many, many years. And a lot of cases, actually, the companies were born out of the supplier and are starting then to supply other companies. And so the integration traditionally was only looking into how the component fits into the vehicle's 12-volt network. I mean, we're looking back in like 1960s, 70s, right? So you only make sure that your component is not shorting the battery and stuff like this. In the 80s and 90s, we started to add communication to this. So the components like the motor, the engine controller was suddenly talking to the gearbox controller and starting to write down error management and all this kind of stuff. So we implemented what we call bus systems, right? So where everybody is talking to everybody. This is traditionally the responsibility of the OEM to do the integration of those components on the 12-volt, so low voltage environment, and the communication with each other. And they're looking on things like checksums and correct behavior on wake up and sleep and all this kind of stuff. Now, software-defined vehicles start to provide a user experience out of several components acting together. Right. And that's not just communication and 12-volt behavior. This is actually integration of the behavior of several pieces that come from different suppliers. And companies like Tesla and around that, they do what's called vertical integration. So they bring everything together, ideally in-house, and they have teams which are understanding the interaction. The traditional car makers don't have those teams yet, at least not at scale. For sure, there are like brilliant engineers in each of those companies who can do that, but not at scale. And that at that point, it becomes a big challenge for them to create features in a car that are not coming out of one component. And that's what I'm referring to when I say this is the integration challenge, right?
Yeah, yeah. And another thing I wanted to talk about is adaptability, getting people, I know Roxana like touched on this a bit earlier, getting people to change after like 30 years in the same process. What is the single most effective strategy that iProcess uses to overcome this cultural resistance to get buy-in from the engineering teams who are used to working in a fixed, defined process?
We might have different answers. So I'll let Roxana answer first because I have my approach and she has hers because we're working usually on different topics.
Right. So my approach is to actually show them how much better it can be. I usually pilot it with a smaller project. I have to earn the trust, right, of the teams and then sit together. And I always like to challenge when they were like, we cannot do that because of whatever process or standard. I said, where is this written? I challenge you to find a better way. And then, but it takes time. It takes time and effort and trust. And in the end, if they like the results, and most of them like the results, then we can scale it within their own companies. So this is
they
how
become the best practice themselves at one point.
Yes.
So in my case, similar approach. I show actually what is working and how it is working, but I also go a very strict bottom-up approach. I don't want to talk to the managers and the process owners and so on. I want to talk to the people who work in that process. I want to talk to the engineers. So when I usually go out and go to an OEM, for example, sure, I'm talking with the management because that's what they bring me in. But I also say like, schedule me time down in the lab. I want to go with the guys, with the car. I want to talk with them and see where they actually hit a snag with the processes as they are right now. And why? But the fun thing is at least 20% of the issues we can actually iron out that day because it's just like old process, misconception, miscommunication, whatever. It happens so often that I bring in two different teams which are working on similar topics and they have, one side has a problem. The other one is like, we have a solution for that for a long time. Hey, I'll show you and I'll solve your problem. It's like, wow, that was free, right? It didn't cost anything. But it is always interesting to me when the people are coming in and obviously I'm from the outside. So I introduce myself. And then they introduce themselves to each other and say, you guys don't know each other? I mean, you work on the same topic in the same company, but on a different platform, right? You should totally know each other casually. It doesn't have to be strict and like top-down defined, right? But casually, you should know each other. We if I may just tell a quick anecdote, but we actually ran into that at Tesla. that there were different test teams, right, for different components. And we had a factory test team and we had the R&D test team. And at one point, we just brought them all together for a one-time thing, just to exchange a little bit. And it turned out that we had like 9 interns working on the same Python script independently. They don't know, right? It was a CAN parser. And we just like, hey, it's enough if one works and the other 8 can do something else, right? That's awesome. So we made this a regular thing. Every Friday, everybody in testing in the company came together. You can dial in. You don't have to bring everybody in the same room. And we realized how much double work is going on and how much solutions already happened somewhere else. And this is something as a best practice, I say, just make it like a lunch meeting. Go to lunch every Friday, all testers, something like that. So we met once a week. Somebody was presenting something they were working on and they got a lot of input. And they got like, hey, this is cool. If you just add 5%, it solves a huge problem on my side. I can use that too, right? So, and this is a communication thing. I think this is a typical Silicon Valley. It's like, hey, we do this together. Yeah, we have very little resources. So what we have is precious. This is a little bit of problem with large car makers. They don't really have a resource shortage. So they throw resources en masse at problems, and that does not give you the most efficient and effective result.
And also, I see that all the time in the supplier quality. They are very boxed, so they limit to their own responsibilities, even though maybe whatever information they get or they could get could make the product better. Oh no, that's not my job. That's not my responsibility. I hate
And
that
that door
so much.
swings in both directions, right? So
Right,
it's not your
right.
responsibility and it's not my responsibility. So it's both sides.
Right.
And unfortunately, I've seen that. There's like, why would you bring that up? That's not your role, right? So you are focusing on whatever, system testing. Don't come with integration problems to me, right? That's the job of the integration team. And the other side, as Roxana says, is like this defense mechanism. It's like, it's not my pay grade. Somebody else should sign for that. It's not my responsibility. Something I really loved working at Tesla is like everybody from the intern to the CEO was focused on making the product better. We had solutions going out that were an idea of somebody who was there just for the summer. And everybody's like, hey, that's a great idea. Let's really develop that in an engineering way, right? And bring that into production. And everybody actually feeling the responsibility to improve the product and not only their personal career and paycheck.
But they are not even doing that, that's the sad part. I mean, high-end OEM, and they tell me they need 3 years to update a spreadsheet, an Excel. The fact that they're still using Excel, that is already mind-blowing to me. But the second they say they need 3 years, because it was not their job, somebody else's, and they only have a lot of excuses instead of, okay, who can do that? How can we move forward? It's just, I'm really upset about this
it's not
mentality.
a technical issue, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there's no technical restrictions that requires you 3 years for a spreadsheet change, right?
Right.
It's a pure mindset and process issue.
Correct.
And that's actually one thing, like one of the main messages I'll give you within this podcast talk here. It's like SDV is actually a maybe 20 to 30% technical challenge. And it's like 70 to 80% is process, mindset, culture.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I see exactly where you're coming from. And you both mentioned that, large car manufacturer, it's not a resource shortage. They just throw resources at a problem and hope it gets solved. But that saying where if you hire more cooks, it's going to take the same amount of time to cook the food.
Correct. Yeah.
Now, if an OEM chooses to ignore the need for adaptive processes and sticks to their 20-year-old methods, what is the most severe consequence that they could face?
A
Well, in
product
one
that
word, they
nobody
go out of
wants.
business.
Yeah. So you know what? I'm doing this job not only as a consultant, but I'm also driving the vehicles myself, right? And I'm a user, and I maybe want to buy next one, and I'm very disappointed. So they stick to their processes. Then they will always have this negotiation with their suppliers, who's paying for what. Nobody wants to do extra, and then in the end, it's me, the driver, that I'm not happy, so I'm not buying. And yes, I guess the final is they go out of business.
Yeah, or I mean, it's an old example and I'm apologizing to rechew it, but you look at Nokia for smartphones, who said, we don't need full screen phones, we need keyboards and we need battery runtime. And everybody for the first couple of years, like, oh my God, I need a phone that I can, I can run for 10 days. Today, nobody is talking about that anymore. Everybody is happily just like charging twice a day, right, with their phones and whatever. So Nokia is not gone. they still make phones for like third world countries. So I'm not saying that every car manufacturer will be gone in 20 years, but what we will see from here on forward, we will see mergers and acquisitions. We will actually see out of business, and we will see market shifts. So that car manufacturers who used to serve like cutting edge first world product will actually go down and either be a supplier. That's the biggest fear they have, right? A supplier for Waymo or Zoox or something like that. Or they will actually shift to markets which have a lower technology, but then therefore obviously also lower income.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they're actually good at manufacturing, right?
Exactly. And exactly. They're really good in building a product in high quality at very high numbers. But to develop that product, that has changed, right? So we will see where the journey goes. You see, like 100 years ago, there were like over 100 manufacturers of cars in the US, right? And in the end, we have now 3 or 4, depends on how you count. And we see the same situation in China happening right now, where it's also, I don't know, by the day, there's a new manufacturer. I asked in Shanghai, I asked them how many car makers you have. I said, nobody knows. More than yesterday. And it's the very clear understanding over there as well. You will have mergers and acquisitions, and you will have companies that will make it and companies that will not make it. That's what's happening right now. And globally, in China specifically, because they are in this tipping point right now, but also we already seen this. If you look at Stellantis, this is the largest like conglomerate of brands and so on. This is going to happen if it solves the problem to like merge and acquire, maybe not. We will see about that. It depends who you acquire, right? So Volkswagen acquired part of Rivian. Does that solve their problem? Time will tell. We can't say yet.
Yeah, with the outdated
Yeah.
processes, how does that fit with anything, right? I don't think it fits, honestly. But yeah, we'll see,
Now,
I guess.
pivoting from the industry to iProcess, what's the one thing that has to go right for iProcess to hit its biggest goals in 2026? And what is the single biggest constraint?
So the market is a little tricky for any kind of consulting business right now, which is kind of like it's an oxymoron, if I use that word right. So on one hand, the market should really talk to consultants like us right now because they are at a pivotal stage. On the other hand, they hold their budgets together because they are at a pivotal stage. So it's like the dog bites its tail situation. So what has to happen for us is really the OEMs and the tier ones, they have to understand that they have a problem. I think that's what happens right now and has happened already. The next thing is they have to understand that they cannot solve the problem themselves. As we speak, this is happening. And then we actually have to manage to be visible to them as a problem solver when they come to their minds and realization that they need external help. And we've done it with companies who went through the process and have really achieved great results. But it is a little bit, they have to understand their situation first so that we can actually help them.
Yeah. And Roxana, would you also agree with that? Or do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I think my goal is to help improve the relationship and transparency between OEMs and suppliers. And hopefully we can do that in 2026 with some solutions that could work for both of them, because everything starts with a good relationship. It's about the product and the project, however they define it, and about the customer, which is the final driver, right? Not about whatever dynamics, teams, power, whatever they are doing. No, I don't care for any of that if it's impacting the product quality, right?
So fair. And just a follow-up on these goals for 2026 and the constraints. Do you have the top 2 or 3 strategic goals over the next 6 to 12 months? And how do you envision achieving those goals without, increasing headcount, for example?
So we are actually working on a product that is in shadow mode right now, so I can't tell you, but we're happy to come back once we get it out of the shadow mode, which is is designed to significantly improve the relationship between OEMs, but also between processes and engineers. So I'd love to tell you more about that, but we can't right now. But we will have a soft launch at CES in Las Vegas, and then we will talk about that. That's number one. And number two is really we have to make it sure that we make visible in what we can do, because we can solve problems and we actually can do that out of the box, but we have to be in communication. And then personally, I also work on my little skill set as a writer. So that's another surprise that might come somewhere mid next year. So that's one of my top 3.
And we're always
And
happy to
Roxana?
share like snippets of knowledge on YouTube. I have an SPICE training. I can design any other trainings that are customized, right? And then for specific learning for each company to see the value of all these models and standards is not just take it literally, right? So education training will always be a goal.
That's very important, especially in the automotive industry. What's something that we need to talk about, but we haven't talked about yet?
I mean, we talk about general strategy for like R&D and processes and so on. I think we really have an idea how OEMs and users should interact more, and we haven't talked about that too much yet. You start to hear car makers talking about customization and to build the product more focused on the user, but they don't, because they don't get that information from me, the user, or anybody. So there has to be a large shift in the way car makers are dealing with their customers, because the introduction of AI into the whole vehicle making and operating process will allow much more customized thing. I mean, just imagine or see it like this. So you have a phone. Everybody has one, right? I am 100% sure that your background picture looks different than mine, right? But in 1999, there was a 50% chance that you and I had the same background picture, right? Because it was very limited. And
Yes.
that's what I'm talking about, right? So full customization, and not only on the picture and the background, but also, you know, how you interact with your car, what kind of buttons you like, what kind of like behavior and sequences you like, eventually kind of driving behavior you like. So all of this, this is going to happen. And if the car makers continue to not provide a channel for the users to give them feedback, they will actually go down the Nokia fate, because Nokia didn't listen to the people who said they want to have touchscreen phones, and therefore they will have a problem.
To be honest with you, I wish they fix their stuff first before adding one more feature that is not working or is incomplete or is insufficient. I wish that they go back and fix what they have right now, which is a lot all over the place with a lot of issues, right?
I could add a lot of sarcastic comments now, but I'm not.
Well, if you want, feel free, because this is just a casual conversation, and so some
I
people
know.
need to hear the hard
So
truth.
yeah, I mean, the truth, and actually you said that yourself, is like throwing resources and making it better, and you have more cooks in the kitchen. And in the end, actually, it's not even taking the same long. It takes longer, because the one cook who knows how to do it is not getting to their work, right?
Yeah.
True.
And this is the problem, is like, we have to catch up, but catch up by really fix the fundamental issue. And then I think my main message here at this point, as a closing argument, if you will, is like, find the right people and give them the chance to fix it. And not like after like 2 minutes, you haven't fixed it yet. Here's 3,000 extra people. Now make sure they do whatever they have to do so you solve it. And then, you still haven't fixed it. Okay, I give you a few more thousand more people or whatever. So find the right people and give them the time to really solve the fundamentals. And we are seeing that in the industry with some companies. They are building small teams which are working independent of the corporate office, trying to solve certain things. But they also have to get the freedom to do so. And if you start, I mean, a random company, so you take a random car maker and you say like, hey, you get a separate office and you can do everything you need to do to solve our fundamental issues, but you have to follow all our processes. That's not going to work, right? So that is exactly the limitation. So it will be interesting to see how Volkswagen Rivian collaboration works out. And that's a very public example of that. And there are other car companies who work less in public with the same approach. I think there's a lot of pivoting happening right now, and you can read that in the news, without giving the real great engineers, and we have a lot of really great engineers, give them a chance really to solve the problem and not just like move them around and pivot all the time.
And I want to
Brian,
add one thing that I read this article recently, and I kind of makes sense for our industry. Complexity, it's not the same as complicated. I think they are complicating things when they should actually keep it simple. And I really like that principle, the KISS, like keep it simple, stupid.
yeah, I love that. I try and follow that every day.
Right? Yeah.
Perfect.
And my partner tells me that as well whenever I'm trying to help her in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Yes. See, the real life example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Well, Florian and Roxana, it was such a great time talking to you. Thank you so much for your time today. It was incredibly insightful to learn about the profit dilution effect of overhead, the importance, like, about everything about iProcess as well, and the automotive industry. I've only done like a very basic research. So I feel like I know so much more after talking from industry leaders as yourself. And I can't wait to see the heights that iProcess reaches next year. And I'd love to catch up sometime in the future, maybe after CES, after you launch your shadow project, and discuss more.
Absolutely. You're
Good. This
welcome
was actually fun.
to check in with us.
Yeah, this is my first podcast. It's fun.
You did great.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
You did great. Thank you so
Awesome.
much, guys.
Thank you so much for having
Excellent.
us. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.